The distress signal had been playing on loop for 3 days across every major broadcasting station in the Galactic Council. Ambassador Zixthar, a 7-foot-tall insectoid with compound eyes that shimmered like oil on water, stood before the emergency assembly with all 4 of his limbs trembling. "Please," his translator crackled with desperation. "The Drakon hive has broken through our defenses on Colony 12. They're unstoppable. We need reinforcements, warriors, soldiers, anyone who can fight. We're begging the newer species. Please, Earth, send anyone." The council chamber erupted in chittering, humming, and various forms of alien discussion. Earth had only joined the galactic community 18 months ago, and their military capabilities remained largely untested and unknown. Most species viewed humans as soft, fleshy creatures who seemed far too concerned with something called coffee and weekends. Commander Zhang of Earth's Galactic Relations Division received the formal request at 600 hours. She stared at the message, then at her roster of available personnel. The timing couldn't have been worse. The bulk of Earth's combat-ready forces were engaged in training, exercises on Mars. The next available unit wouldn't be ready for deployment for at least 72 hours, except for one name on the volunteer civilian list. Margaret O'Sullivan, age 73, had been the first to sign up when Earth opened applications for cultural exchange and emergency response volunteers. Her application listed her skills as raised 8 children, managed a restaurant for 40 years, not afraid of anything, and makes excellent pie. Commander Zhang had initially dismissed it as a joke, but now, with the aliens literally begging for anyone and Mrs. O'Sullivan being the only volunteer cleared and available, well, technically she qualified. 20 minutes later, Margaret O'Sullivan stood in the transport bay, wearing a floral dress, sensible shoes, and carrying a worn leather handbag. In her right hand, she gripped her grandmother's rolling pin, solid maple, seasoned by generations of determined baking, and the occasional discipline of wayward grandchildren. "Mrs. O'Sullivan," Commander Zhang began carefully, "you understand this is a combat situation?" Margaret fixed her with the same look that had made her children confess to breaking the cookie jar before she'd even asked. "Young lady, I raised 8 kids during the recession, managed a kitchen with 15 temperamental staff, and once faced down a bear that got into my garbage. I think I can handle some bugs." The Galactic Council's reaction to Earth's warrior was mixed, Ambassador. Zixthar's antennae drooped when Margaret materialized on the transport pad of their command ship. "This is your soldier?" "I'm nobody's soldier, Sonny," Margaret said, adjusting her handbag. "I'm a volunteer. Now where are these Drakon that need sorting out?" The Drakon were a nightmare species, chitinous, aggressive, and roughly the size of bears. They hunted in swarms, overwhelmed defenses through sheer numbers, and their exoskeletons could withstand most standard plasma weapons. Colony 12's defenders had been pushed back to their final stronghold, a residential district where civilians huddled in terror. Margaret surveyed the battlefield through the command ship's view screen. Thousands of Drakon swarmed through the streets like a living tide of rage and mandibles. "Those things are heading for the residential area?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Yes," Zixthar confirmed. "We've evacuated most civilians there, but the remaining soldiers are too few. We cannot stop them." Margaret's expression shifted into something the aliens had never seen before, the universal look of a grandmother who'd just witnessed someone threatening her family. It transcended species. Even Zixthar's instincts recognized it and took a step back. "Young man," she said, voice sharp as a knife, "you're going to transport me down there right now, and someone needs to turn on their speakers. But you'll be now." 5 minutes later, Margaret O'Sullivan materialized in the central plaza of Colony 12's residential district. The Drakon swarm sensed her immediately, thousands of eyes turning toward this small, elderly human female. Then she started yelling, "That is quite enough." The sound system projected her voice across every street, every building. The Drakon hesitated. In their collective consciousness, they'd never encountered anything like this before. Not fear, not aggression, but pure, concentrated disappointment and fury. Margaret raised her rolling pin and pointed it at the nearest cluster of Drakon. "I don't know what you think you're doing, making all this racket and scaring these poor people, but it stops right now. You should be ashamed of yourselves." She advanced, rolling pin raised. The front line of Drakon, each one capable of tearing through reinforced steel, retreated. Something in their primitive hindbrain recognized the universal constant they'd just encountered, the indomitable wrath of an angry grandmother. "And look at this mess you've made." Margaret gestured at the destroyed buildings and cratered streets. "Did your mothers raise you in a barn? Were you born in the garbage? Because that's exactly how you're acting." A Drakon warrior, bolder than the others, clicked its mandibles and lunged forward. Margaret's rolling pin connected with its head with a solid thwack that echoed across the plaza. The creature stumbled backward, more shocked than injured. "Don't you dare take that tone with me." Margaret advanced, and the swarm retreated. "Every single one of you is going to turn around and march back to wherever you came from. Or so help me. I will tan your hides until you can't sit down for a week." What happened next would be studied by xenopsychologists for decades. The Drakon hive mind, which operated on principles of aggression and dominance, encountered something entirely outside its programming. Not a threat to fight or prey to consume, but an authority figure so absolute, so fundamentally right in her fury, that their collective instinct was to obey. The swarm stopped. Thousands of Draken stood motionless in the streets. Margaret pointed toward the colony's edge with her rolling pin. March, they marched. The entire Drakon invasion force, which had devastated 3 colony worlds and destroyed countless military units, retreated in orderly fashion under the withering glare and sharp commands of one Margaret O'Sullivan. Within an hour, they had withdrawn from Colony 12 entirely. Back on the command ship, the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as Margaret dusted off her dress and straightened her handbag. "Right then," she said calmly. "Someone mentioned there were refugees who need feeding? Because I didn't bring my rolling pin just for show. These people need a proper meal." Ambassador Zixthar found his voice first. "How? What did you do?" Margaret gave him a patient smile. "Dear, when you've raised 8 children and run a kitchen, you learn that bullies are all the same. They've just never met someone who won't put up with their nonsense. Now, are we going to stand around gawking, or are we going to help these people?" The story of the Battle of Colony 12 spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire. Earth, the newcomer species, had sent a single elderly female armed with a baking implement and sheer force of personality to defeat an invasion that had threatened to destroy them all. Other species began to wonder, if this was what Earth sent when they said anyone, what exactly were their actual warriors capable of? They never asked Earth to send anyone casually again. As for Margaret O'Sullivan, she returned home with a Galactic Medal of Honor, which she placed on her mantle next to photos of her grandchildren. When reporters asked her secret, she simply smiled. "There's nothing special about it," she said. "Whether it's rowdy grandchildren, temperamental line cooks, or alien invaders, everyone needs someone to tell them when they're misbehaving. I just happened to be available." And somewhere in the depths of space, the Drakon hive mind carried a new instinct, coded deep into their collective memory. Never, ever anger a human grandmother with a rolling pin. Some lessons, it seemed, were truly universal.